It is time to open up the Peacock and Williamson mailbag live. We're talking the London Jaguars getting back-to-back games overseas, some schedule leaks, player development timelines, and have we seen the end of Hall of Fame running backs? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. That's where most of the questions are coming from on today's program. You can also drop a question in for our weekly mailbags on our new YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed up there. Of course, you can find us on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Matt, I do want to start here with some schedule leaks here. And one of the most interesting ones, and I really like this for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it is back-to-back games in London. And when you're the Jaguars and you're a small market team, like try to build that fan base however you can. You have a really young, marketable star quarterback, right? On the cusp of superstardom potentially. And if you can get, it's going to be hard for you to sell, a million Trevor Lawrence jerseys outside of Duval County. But man, you could sell millions of Trevor Lawrence jerseys, in I don't even know what county London is in, but you can sell a lot over there, right? So make your franchise global if you're going to be small market as compared to other franchises here in the States. So I love it for the Jaguars and lean into it if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So the way I understood this went down was when overseas was becoming more and more regular, particularly to London, particularly to Europe, of course, the Jags were probably the worst franchise in the league. They're always picking in the top 5, Bortles, we know how bad things went. And relatively speaking, the rest of the league, they're an expansion team, sort of. I mean, a lot of our listeners don't remember when that was, but there's not generations and generations of Jags fans, like in my hometown, your hometown. So attendance was bad. It was a tough sell. So I think they came to an agreement, or frankly, I think, Jacksonville volunteered, hey, we'll give up a home game to go over. And this reminds me of like the 40s or 50s, like when Thanksgiving football came around. The reason Dallas and Detroit play every Thanksgiving is back when nobody wanted it, they volunteered and said, we'll do it. We'll have a home game. We'd rather be home eating turkey with our friends. And TV wasn't as big back then, but the league has rewarded them since, and now it's a tradition. Could be the same type of thing for the Jags. We're the home team in this area of Europe, and we're going to stay there, and it's going to become an advantage. And because we kind of gave something up to do it years ago.
And Josh asks even further, is it competitive advantage for them to be able to stay and do 2 in a row? And you've got teams with that long travel coming in and out on back-to-back weeks. So I think
it's a massive,
especially the second half of the back-to-back is a massive win for the Jaguars there from a competitive advantage in that week specifically.
Yeah. I mean, so I always bring it back to personal experience. I never traveled with the team overseas or anything like that. But my co-host, Dale Lawley with the Steelers, has been covering the Steelers for 30-some years and has done some abroad games. And he talks about this every year when we talk about away games. He's like, whoever travels over there first, I'm probably going to bet on, because it's a ridiculous adjustment. Your body does not adjust in time. And if you get a whole week of being over there and totally adjusted, and you understand, it feels like breakfast at breakfast time and feels like kickoff at kickoff time, they should, I don't know if I can bet that game right now or not, but the second, quote, London, home game for the Jags, they should be favored by a lot. I don't even know who they play.
The Jaguars should be a pretty darn good football team too, and continuing to get better and better, and with a young star quarterback. I just like the direction the Jacksonville Jaguars are going this year. And it took them a little bit to get going last year, but then you started to see it. And Jacksonville Jaguars fans should be excited, those in Duval County and those abroad as well. So, interesting the way to build that franchise. And if you were the Steelers or the 49ers, right? Or if you're the Dallas Cowboys, right, you don't need those overseas games. And a lot of times it's probably hurting you. But,
it's a detriment. You'd rather have the home game.
You want a big fan base, right? And for a team like the Jaguars, it makes all the sense in the world. So I love it for them.
Yeah, and now they've got a little bit of a foothold there. So good for them. I think they're starting to reap the benefits of it, where they were in, I don't say a downtrodden position, but they were – if a team was going to move or leave their town, it seemed like Jacksonville was the first one on the list.
And not only for a team just to be playing there, but to have a player that you buy your kid their jersey, and then they're cultivating generations of fans, right? And that's what Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars could do.
Say I'm a young boy who's 10 years old in London, and I don't watch NFL, but I go to that game, and there's a lot of Jags jerseys here. They seem like the home team, and who's this guy with the long blonde hair that looks different than everybody else? And there's pictures of him everywhere, like he's marketable as could be.
And then you get to watch your team maybe make the playoffs.
Right.
And they don't stink. TV in the middle of the night, maybe. Can the kids stay up and watch the playoff games is a big question too.
But I bet Lawrence jerseys are going to be selling overseas.
Absolutely. So fascinating. There's tons of angles with the NFL schedule drop. The official entire schedule drop is happening tomorrow. So tomorrow morning we will do our pod and cover everything schedule wise. But I did want to talk about that, and there were some questions in the hopper about the Jacksonville Jaguars and their back-to-back London games, which is super interesting. And by the way, Matt, looking like there might be a very interesting matchup for us to kick off the season.
So I've heard.
Week 1. For those of you who don't know, and welcome to the program, this is one of your first times listening to Peacock and Williamson. Matt Williamson covers the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Steelers area. I cover the 49ers here in the Bay Area, host of Locked On 49ers. And I think those two teams might be going head-to-head in week 1, which will be a lot of fun for us here. Maybe we'll have to travel for that one.
Well, we know your guys are coming here at some point during the year. That's for sure. That's set in stone.
We know that.
And on my Steeler podcast, we often look at the schedule, and I think there's things to look at in schedules in terms of, like, you hate to play in Denver the first month of the year because no one has their wind. You hate to play in Miami late in the year. You don't want to go to Buffalo in December. Well, I looked at the Niner game going, boy, that's going to be one of the hardest games on the schedule. I hope they play them early because maybe they don't know who the heck the quarterback is at that point.
Yeah, you'd much rather get Darnold than like a more seasoned Trey Lance or a healthy Brock Purdy if you're the Steelers.
Or Purdy without any, preseason action. That's his first one thrown in there, or something like that.
So from my sources, if it is indeed week 1, 49ers at Steelers, I think that's a good draw for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and maybe a good road trip for myself and a lot of 49ers fans to go.
Yeah, I got a spare bedroom if you want.
Hey, there we go. All right. Is that for just me or for everybody listening?
Well,
the Williamson Hotel is open.
Yeah, come on by. Yeah.
All right. Fantastic stuff.
Just
here.
You.
Let's see. Getting back into the mailbag here. What do we think about Treylon Burks? Josh has the question here.
Yeah.
Does Treylon Burks have the potential to be a true number 1 wide receiver, or do the Titans need someone else to fill the A.J. Brown hole in their roster?
So I urge everyone to spend a couple bucks a month and go sign up for Reception Perception that Matt Harmon does. And I've mentioned it on here many times. And if you're a real wide receiver nerd or fantasy, it'll pay off for you. If that's not your bag, don't. But anyway, I read everything he puts out, and he just put out profiles, coincidentally, of all the prominent second-year receivers, Olave, Wilson, Pickens, et cetera, et cetera. And I just finished reading them yesterday, actually. And I thought he summarized Burks very well in that some of his references were, this is a talented player that was used in a very strange manner at Arkansas. I mean, a lot of backfield carries, ends arounds, get him the ball behind the line of scrimmage, break a tackle. He was the entire offense. And if you recall, he didn't test great. Everyone thought he'd be a great tester, and he wasn't. And Matt mentioned this, and I agree. He doesn't look like a great athlete on the field. However, I use this reference as well, and it applies to Sky Moore with the Chiefs as well, because Matt kind of references. So this past summer, we took the kids to Turks and Caicos, which was the nicest place we've ever been with, especially with children. And we get there, we get off the plane. I go get the rental car, and I'm like, oh, didn't think of this, but the steering wheel's on the wrong side. All right, that'll be a challenge, but I can handle it. Pulling out, I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to drive on the left side of the road. Well, for the first 2 or 3 days driving around Turks and Caicos, I put my family in grave danger 30 times. Like roundabouts, I went the wrong way, just pulling directly into traffic. Well, I think that's Burks and Sky Moore's rookies. I mean, what they were asked to do in college versus what they were asked to do in their rookie year, night and day. I mean, the way Harmon was describing it is like you go to a new town, you have a new job, you don't know anything around, you don't have GPS. So I think there's promise for those guys, and I'm lumping them together because their jobs changed dramatically from college.
And there's kind of two parts to this question, because does Treylon Burks have the potential to be a true number one wide receiver? Yeah. I mean, he was drafted high for a reason, and he's a unique player, and maybe not a true number one, but I think he could become a true number one. I'm not going to say he can't become a true number one. Or do they need someone else to fill the AJ Brown hole? Now, can he be AJ Brown level? Can he fill the AJ Brown hole? Those are two different questions. And he can be a really good starting wide receiver and still not fill that AJ Brown hole. And I would add more players. So I would continue to fill that hole if I was the Titans.
He's not an advanced route runner. I mean, the chances of him developing into a great route runner are probably slim. He has a long way to go. So I know someone asked us about Calvin Ridley, so he's on my mind. If they had a Calvin Ridley type out route technician opposite him, I think that would do wonders for the Titans. But we know that's a big work in progress. That's not going to happen overnight.
Speaking of Calvin Ridley, what do we expect from him coming up this year? Have we seen the end of NFL Hall of Fame running backs with the way running back value has plummeted in the recent decade? And player development timelines. How soon is too soon to know if one of your 2023 draft picks was a bust? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson, which is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Looking for that delicious snack? I know you are, but you don't want all the sugar and calories, do you? Then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, which is Built. If you're like me, you're trying to make healthier snack choices. You don't want to compromise on taste, though. You want to feel good about the snacks that you're getting, and you want to feel satisfied when you do reach for that snack. So that's why Built Bars and Built Puffs are perfect for you. They are healthy and taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing, you wouldn't think they're good for you at all. You got to try these unbelievable flavors, and most Built Bars covered in 100% real chocolate as well, which really sets it off. And it is good, real chocolate, not some chocolatey brown colored substance. It's actual chocolate. And I don't know how they do it, but they keep the macros right where you need them with flavors like churro. Peanut butter puff is the newest at built.com. Cookies and cream, cookie dough chunk puff. But only 130 calories in most Built Bars, only 4 grams of sugar in most Built Bars, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. And not only can you find all the flavors at Built.com, you can find them at your local Walmart and Sam's Club as well. 4-bar boxes in the pharmacy section at your nearest Walmart. Flavors like cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, coconut puff. And at Sam's Club, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box of hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff, and then thank us later. And of course, all the flavors and varieties and new flavors all the time at Built.com. All right. Shout out to everybody jumping in the live chat here on the new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed up there. Hit the thumbs up, the like button. Make sure you hit the notification bell as well, so you know when we do go live and when we drop new podcasts. And I know this is a quote-unquote Twitter Thursday, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat as well, talking NFL football and post-draft stuff. I want to get to the player development timeline really quick here.
Okay.
As it pertains to the NFL draft and what we can expect from players and how long it takes certain players to become either a bust or what you expect them to be in their NFL career. And this is from Michael. And he says, which positions take the longest or shortest amount of seasons to determine if the draft pick was a boom or a bust?
I mean, in terms of, this is sort of fantasy relevant. I think everyone knows tight ends take a lot longer than backs and receivers. You know, I remember when third-year breakout used to be a thing for wide receivers. Well, now if it takes you 2 years to break out,
no, it's the second. It better be a second-year breakout.
Yeah. I mean, that is gone by the wayside. But tight ends are a notorious slow starting position. And usually they hit their stride around 27 years old, which is when running backs are basically starting to get washed up, so you have to be relevant of that. So maybe you don't draft one in the first round. You grab one off his first contract like Jacksonville did with Evan Ingram, and then that's when he starts to hit his stride. I definitely think technique-based positions, especially O-line, take time. None of these some of these O-linemen have never even put their hand in the dirt, in college or run blocked, so you're asking them to drive on the left side of the road on the wrong side of the, like we just talked about. I think linebacker more and more we've talked in depth about first round linebacker busts. I think it's just such a difficult mental position now because guys like your boy Shanny just manipulate them to no end and takes a long time.
No doubt. I would say clearly running backs is the fastest position.
Agreed.
If you can't see a hole and hit it from almost day one, like there's some things that might take a little time, pass protection, but if you're just as a pure runner, if you can't find a hole and hit it, it's probably not going to happen for you in the NFL. And Steven in the chat here says LT had over 300 carries and 50 catches as a rookie. Does anyone do that anymore? Nobody does it ever. Not only as a rookie, they don't get 300 carries anymore.
Well, Bijan might have something to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot.
That's a big number, though. That's crazy. Yes.
But and that kind of goes into our next topic about the Hall of Fame running back, because you don't lean on running backs like you used to, but still running backs, you can tell early in their career if they're going to be great or not. Quarterbacks, obviously, It takes a little bit of time. I would say offensive linemen, pass rushers, just because developing that technique and counter moves, you can show flashes early in your career, but it usually takes to year 2, 3 before you start to see, the real player you're going to get from a pass rusher perspective. From an offensive lineman for sure. Mm-hmm. I would say kickers. I mean, can you think of a guy? Think of a kicker that was good in your lifetime. You're thinking of a guy who was in his 30s and maybe 40s.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember McPherson for the Bengals had a nice rookie year, and then he was okay in year 2. Maybe he just got hot for 2 months when everybody was paying attention. You know what I mean? And there's trickiness involved. But you're right. The good ones are old.
Yes. Yeah.
They're old.
So, so you should never jump too soon and call a guy a bust after a rookie year. But if you haven't seen something after 3 years, I mean, it's time. And that timeline has sped up too. And I think part of it is how much guys play when they're younger. They're more prepared coming into the league now than they used to be, even though some of the schemes are different. Just as far as playing your position, more terminology, more things. And then from a finances standpoint, just the dollars of the game, you used to, rookie contracts are so important now. You're not going to get re-signed if someone's not ready to pay you for your rookie contract. Well, you're a journeyman, and that's the end of that's the end of you really getting a strong foothold in the NFL after 3 years. They've made those decisions.
So I obviously have very strong Steeler roots, and I've brought this up many times. I'm turning 50 next year, and I'm going to see 3 coaches in my lifetime, which is bonkers. But I do think one of the biggest mistakes the NFL makes is way too much turnover in the front office and coaching staff. That we're having half of the offensive coordinators got fired this year. Like half as many play callers. But what I'm going with this is I think there's a lot of value to Belichick remembers 2 years ago when they drafted this dude in the 5th round, knowing he was not going to help this year. We knew exactly what he was coming in. He's raw as the day is long. But if he would have got fired and a new coach comes in, like, this guy stinks. Why'd they draft this guy? Get him out. If your stability, you have a plan with every player and you have some patience, maybe that player's not progressing as you want. But some of them you're like, I need the 2nd round pick to play now, and he can't, and we're in trouble. Or I got the 6th rounder to develop, and he's developing great, but it's going to be a year.
And just talking about quarterbacks too, when you think back to 2005 when Aaron Rodgers was drafted, he sat for 3 years, no big deal. We got a plan. He's going to develop, and then he's going to take over, and he's going to play. Well, they did the same thing. The same franchise did with Jordan Love, right? And it's the same group that drafted him. But after 3 years, it's like, oh my God, what's going on? We don't even know what this guy is. Trey Lance after a couple of years, even though the plan was to have him sit for 1 year. So he gets hurt, one injury, and all of a sudden, I don't know. Maybe you got to trade him. Don't know what to do with this guy. He hasn't shown us anything yet for 2 years. So the timelines are just so sped up compared to what they used to be, which is somewhat unfair for some of the players, especially those that need some time and need some playing time. And then you think of a guy like Geno Smith, who
Great point.
Was a bust for the Jets, but now his career was not a bust because now he's made good with a different franchise and he's gotten paid a little bit. And so it's like, if you look at Geno Smith's career, you're like, good job, man. You had a nice long, what was he drafted? 2012? He had a 10-year plus.
Yeah, I think he was
NFL
the luck
career.
draft, luck RG3 draft.
Yeah. So, and he wasn't a first round pick, but
Second.
he was definitely a bust for the team that drafted him, but he made good. And so his career's not a bust, but he still was kind of a bust. So, you still do have time to come out of that tailspin if it doesn't happen early for you, but that is also a rarity.
I mean, if you even go back in the Wayback Machine, like Rich Gannon, late in his career, really steps up, or some guys that were drafted super high, like Vinny Testaverde and Jim Plunkett. I mean, these are like Heisman first overall guys that go to awful situations, but when they're 30, they're pretty darn good. Kerry Collins,
Steve Young is another one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
Yeah. He, flamed out. He was in the LA Express of the USFL. Buccaneers, didn't work, ends up with the 49ers, backing up Steve Young, and he was practically 30 by the time he got a shot and had a Hall of Fame career still.
And I mean, again, more Steeler talk, but this was a million years ago. But when Terry Bradshaw got drafted, he was worse than Zach Wilson for 3 years. I mean, there's no way that would have happened today. The ends goes on to win 4 Super Bowls and go to the Hall of Fame. I mean, he was dreadful.
It's pretty unbelievable. All right.
Yeah.
More getting to the chat a little
Hall
bit.
of Fame running back chat here too.
Yeah, this is interesting. Have we seen the end of Hall of Fame running backs? Speaking of not only usage, but just how they are valued around the league and the proliferation of the committee back. Next. Do want to thank everybody for jumping in the live chat here. And thanks for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to the Everydayers. Tomorrow, we're breaking down all of the official NFL schedule news from the official schedule drop. So stay tuned there. And of course, continuing our deep dives into the division and teams NFL drafts, finishing up the AFC with the West next week, as well as getting into the NFC divisions right here on Peacock and Williamson. Okay. Question from Twitter, Matt. Have we seen the end of Hall of Fame running backs?
So I'm not putting words in our Twitter question's mouth, but I promise this is where it came from because I listened to this episode yesterday of the Athletics podcast with Robert Mays and Nate Tice on. It's a great podcast. They do great work.
Good stuff.
And somebody asked them in their mailbag the same question. And when I heard the question, I'm like, it's kind of a dumb question. We've seen great backs lately. And they talked it through, and I hate to put words in other people's mouths because I'd be unhappy if they did the same for me. But they kind of came to the conclusion that maybe we are going to see the end of Hall of Fame running backs. And I'm sitting there thinking, they said things like, well, maybe if Derrick Henry has 2 more really good years, he's in. And I'm sitting there thinking, Henry's in. I mean, that's a transcendent player that was the foundation of his team. He's in. So knowing that we were going to get this question, I'm like, let's go look at the all-time rushing leaders. And I'm not going to include Adrian Peterson in this because I'm calling him retired. And if he is not retired, he's going to run for 100 more yards in his career. He's done.
And I would consider Adrian Peterson still, because this is a new thing. He's also a different era.
That's what I was going to say. The Peterson Lynch era is when analytics start showing up. You know what I mean? Like they're pre-analytics to me. And then everybody since is, we're not going to feed Adrian Peterson and Marshawn Lynch 8,000 times, and they're old school guys in this conversation. So it might not shock you, but the 2 leading rushers that are active are Derrick Henry and Ezekiel Elliott. And what shocked me though, is they are 42nd and 43rd all time in rushing yards. There's 41 dudes that have run for more yards than Derrick Henry and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, guys like Amon Green and Willis McGahee are right above them. So by that logic, do they really have Hall of Fame credentials? Because Zeke's basically done. Henry might get us another 2,000-3,000 more yards. Maybe, who knows? And then the next active guy is Mark Ingram, Melvin Gordon. And then you get some of the younger dudes like Nick Chubb. Latavius Murray is on the list. It's like the 5th leading rusher active. Guys that have no chance to go in the Hall of Fame, like Murray. However, this is a long-winded answer. I think when you look at any all-time great or who's the best ever, Gretzky versus Jordan versus Babe Ruth versus Montana, blah, 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 blah. I think the only way to logically do it is compare the player to his era. And I always use the Babe Ruth and Jim Brown conversation. Is Jim Brown, folks, was the equivalent of today of being a 315-pound running back. He was as big as his lineman that runs like a 4.2 and is the most agile and brutal and competitive player on the field. You know, like that's what he would be if he was today, like something my son made in Madden. And Babe Ruth hit more home runs than like every team in the league. You know, like that to me is being the best in your era. So to me, Henry, McCaffrey, those are the best guys at running back in their era and should be Hall of Famers. But organizations like the Hall of Fame can be a little slow to adjust because they're going to say Henry only has 8,300 yards. He's the 42nd leading rusher ever. I can't put him in the Hall of Fame. But it should correct itself and be like, McCaffrey was a dominant player for 8 to 10 years. He's a Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so McCaffrey's got one of the better shots. And again, staying healthy is important because he's still in his 20s. You know, can he get into the 30s and make a career out of continuing to play, continue to stay healthy, continue to put up the receiving stats? And then by the time, you know, those decisions are being made in the Hall of Fame, which is, you know, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be probably somewhat of a lull because you're just not going to be – the counting stats are not going to – there might not
They're
be
not going to be there.
There might not be another running back in NFL history that has as many rushing yards as Frank Gore, right?
Oh, right. I don't think there will. I mean, he's here at the top.
So long. And so you're competing, and he's like a borderline Hall of Fame guy, I think. So, and he's going to get in because he has so many rushing yards, but he was never like the greatest at the time. He was among the better backs, but never like the guy.
I'm pulling it up. He has 1,600 yards exactly in 15 seasons. No one's going to run 15 years in a row.
No,
never.
No. And so you're not going to stack up against Hall of Famers. So if you're like, hey, is this guy a Hall of Famer? Let's pull up the other Hall of Famers. They're forever now. Running backs are going to fall short unless there's something special that we don't see coming, and that's possible. And so it's going to have to be it's going to have to be both. Okay, there's some guys like Adrian Peterson and some guys that are going to start to get in, and then in about 5 years, going to be like, oh, there's no more Hall of Fame running backs.
There's going to be a drop.
And then the committee is going to have to rethink the way they vote on these things and look at them versus their peers in the passing game and not just rushing yards and start to. And so I think there will be a gap. Will they come back and start getting voted in again with the McCaffreys and stuff, in the gap between whenever Adrian Peterson's career ended and when McCaffrey's career ends? Kind of like there's going to be a lull in Hall of Famers, and that's still, and McCaffrey still has, Derrick Henry, you just mentioned, Zeke Elliott. These guys have a lot of work to do still, even to be Hall of Famers, in my opinion. But they have the best chance now, and hardly anybody else has any chance.
Agreed. And I do think the bar or the standards will have to change. I mean, you and I are old enough to remember, you draft Eric Dickerson 3rd overall, you give him the ball 1,000 times and go from there. Like you look at these all-time rushing leaders, they are bell cows. I mean, and even the Tomlinsons and Falks that are way ahead of their time as receivers, they're way at the top of the list. They're both top 12 in rushing yards ever. I mean, so the Barry Sanders, Emmett's number 1, of course. Like those days are gone. I mean, I think that's for sure.
Good point by Steven in the chat. Henry needs another 2,500 rushing yards to pass Warrick Dunn.
Right. And Warrick Dunn's not even sniffing the Hall of Fame.
Right. And you're not thinking of him as an all-time great, really good player.
Right. But Henry's a much better case if he never plays today than Warrick Dunn, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. Because of how good he was.
Impact on the game. Yeah.
Right. Let's finish this up with Wood Gravy. Good question here in the chat. Says, rank the quarterbacks that showed small sample size of goodish play. Lawrence, Geno Smith, Brock Purdy, Justin Fields. We've got Giants QB that he can't recall.
Daniel Jones, I assume. Yeah.
I think he's talking about Daniel Jones there. Yeah, smallest sample of goodish play.
Who's Kenny Stills?
Kenny Stills is a receiver. I think he means somebody else. I'm not sure who he's even talking about there.
Kenny Pickett or
Kenny Pickett maybe is maybe. But I get the question from Woodgrave. We appreciate it. The quarterbacks we've seen a small sample of pretty good play from. Rank those quarterbacks. If we're talking right now today or rest of career, it might change things. But even right now today, I think I would rank them Trevor Lawrence first, Justin Fields 2. And then I think we'd have to have some tough conversations.
I think Lawrence is in a different category. I think he's arrived, Fields is close to make or break time, and I lean that he's going to make, not break. Geno was mentioned, and we talked about him earlier. Tremendous story. They trust him. Locker room leader. I'm a little scared of the Seahawks approach on Geno. That they're just kind of all in. And really the last month or two of the season, he was okay, not great. Like, could he turn into a pumpkin?
It's definitely possible. Or just like, oh, cool. He's a good quarterback. He's fine. But we need to get better. Be what happens with the, and then he goes back to being a backup. That's possible. Or maybe, he just keeps lighting it up like he did for the first half of the season last year. But I would put him back as far as if I'm betting on just this year and going forward, obviously because of his age. I'm taking Brock Purdy over him. I'm taking Trevor Lawrence, obviously. Justin Fields. An interesting one though is because I still am not a huge believer in Daniel Jones, but I am a believer in Brian Daboll. So I wonder how much more is there. That's an interesting one. What about Tua? Where would you rank him with these quarterbacks?
Yeah, that's a great one. I say this a lot, especially young quarterbacks and more so landing spots, that I care where they land than who they are. And I think Jones in New York, because of Daboll, because of going and getting Waller and Hyatt and Michael Schmidt and 8,000 slot receivers, he's in a position now to succeed, where he really wasn't up till now. I never would have taken him with the 5th overall pick. I don't know that I would have given him this contract, but I bet he's going to be a serviceable starter, which sounds like a negative connotation. It isn't. There's only like 16 or 17 of them in the world. I think he'll be one of them, but never a top 10 guy. So where does that leave you? That's a whole different conversation. Tua, to me, is out of the woods, especially when you talk about landing spot, scheme. I mean, his numbers and his play was really, really good. Now, I think he might benefit from those around him more than anyone that's not a 49er. But him, it's just durability. And I don't know how to comment on that.
Wow, Brock Purdy disrespect. I didn't expect that to happen in the 9 a.m. hour for me on the West Coast.
They're the next opponent, man. I'm going to have to be rough on them from now until opening day, apparently.
Okay, here's a good one then, Matt.
They're the enemy.
What order do you draft these quarterbacks in right now? You're drafting them for your brand new football franchise you are the GM of.
Okay.
Kenny Pickett, Brock Purdy, Daniel Jones, and I'll throw Geno Smith in there too. Why not?
Geno's last.
Yeah.
Are we accounting for age?
Yeah, because you're drafting them for your new franchise going forward. Yeah. So, really the question I want to get to is Kenny.
You're really digging for
first and last quarterbacks in the draft last year. Kenny. Let's simplify it more. Kenny Pickett versus Brock Purdy.
We just throw the gauntlet down now for week 1 battle.
There you go.
I'd rather Pickett by a mile, to be honest with you. And I'm trying to be as impartial as possible. I just think that if you threw Pickett in that Niner offense last year, it would have been even better. And I think Purdy is too limited for me. I love his, what's that test that he did great on? Because that shows up on the field.
Yeah, what I mean?
It does show up on the field. I just think this is sort of a side note. So I heard this the other day. Jimmy Garoppolo has started 2 games in his career without Mike Shanahan. Now, do we know Garoppolo's even good? Like,
without Kyle Shanahan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Without Kyle, I said Mike. Right. So
for a second, I was like, wait, was Mike on the Patriots staff at some point?
So he has 2 career starts, non-Shanny. I just feel like anyone in Shanny's scheme is good. He's that good a coach. It's a compliment and a backhanded compliment. Yes.
There is something about Jimmy Garoppolo could be in this conversation too about how do you rank these quarterbacks? There's something with the Shanahan offense that it really showed up with Jimmy Garoppolo with the mistakes and the bad plays, which are the quick interceptions.
Yeah.
And I've seen Purdy make that interception. I've seen Trey Lance make that interception. And it's almost as much a Kyle Shanahan interception as I think it was a Jimmy Garoppolo interception. So I can't wait to see Jimmy, because Jimmy did look good in those 2 starts in the however few games he played with Bill Belichick was kind of ready to go with Jimmy Garoppolo over.
Yeah, he's not a nobody, right?
Yeah. So and he's back with Josh McDaniels now. So I'm fascinated to see what that looks like with Jimmy Garoppolo. But there's something that with Kyle Shanahan, he's such a good offensive coordinator and play designer, but he's also kind of playing quarterback himself. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's like these guys are joysticks.
Which is good and bad because he's in your ear and he's like, here's the play call, blah, 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 a 1,000,000-word play call. And then he says, look for this or this. And you know the thing that it's designed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And for the quarterback, that's where they're going. But if that's not there, linebacker interception. And it's the same type of interception that I've seen over and over the course of 6 years with the 49ers. That's a little bit on Kyle. And so it's not the freest offense for quarterbacks. And I wonder if Jimmy, we might see him be a little bit more free now with the Raiders, back with, Josh McDaniels, and just the way that,
maybe.
Okay, I'm kind of in the shotgun a little more, not as much turning my back to the defense and then hitting that thing that's supposed to be there. A little bit free, 1-2, he's open, boom, throw it. So I wonder if we might see a little bit of that from Jimmy, and it might look a little different. So, and these players, these coaches aren't perfect, but as easy as it is sometimes to be a Kyle Shanahan quarterback, Kyle's playing quarterback. And I think that's what helped Brock Purdy so much. After one of those games he played last year, the question was after the game, Brock, why are you playing so well? This is crazy. And he's like, I don't know. I just do what the coach tells me to do. Kyle Shanahan was like, yes, that's my guy. That is my guy.
Sign me up. Yeah. I mean, it's paint by numbers quarterbacking. Right. It's not a Rembrandt or, a Monet, or I don't know anything about art, of course. But I mean, it's paint by numbers. I'm simplifying it, but a first grader can do it. I put blue in number 2 and I put red in number 3, and right.
It's difficult but easy because you're playing against the defense more than you're playing your own offense. You're not like, I'm going to go make a play, see who's open, and make this big thing. It's like, well, the defense's rules are this, and we're going to use those rules against them and make this throw in this pocket. And
I love the point you made about all the Shanahan quarterbacks have made that same interception, because I used to say Jimmy goes linebacker blind. Hits that guy right in the numbers. Because that's where he's supposed to go to the football. And once in a while, the defense makes a defensive call better than your offensive call.
Well, they know what you're trying to do, and they jump in with that robber. And so they jump into a hole. They show you the hole because, they know that you're trying to do the thing, and then they get in there.
They're getting paid too, Yeah. Good stuff.
That being said, wrong answer from Matt Williamson earlier, picking Kenny Pickett over Brock Purdy. All right. Fantastic stuff. Thanks, everybody, for jumping into the live chat. We're doing the weekly mailbag, so get involved and jump in with us here on the YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed up, hit the like button, the notification, and all that. And, of course, we're coming at you every day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Matt and I back tomorrow talking schedule release right here, Peacock and Williamson.